Picture this. Rome, 1st century AD. A room lit by a single oil lamp. The air smells like sweat and hot metal. A young slave stands with his legs stretched across a wooden block, and his owner, a former secretary to the Emperor Nero, is slowly, deliberately twisting it. The slave doesn't scream. He looks up, almost curious, and says something like, "If you keep doing that, you're going to break my leg." The owner keeps twisting. The bone snaps. And the slave, without raising his voice, simply says, "See, I told you." That man's name was Epictetus. He would spend the rest of his life crippled, and he would spend the rest of his life becoming one of the calmest, most quietly powerful minds the ancient world ever produced. A man whose ideas, 2,000 years later, are quietly borrowed by therapists, athletes, and executives who have no idea they're doing philosophy homework from a broken-legged slave. Here's the question this story is really about. Why didn't he get angry? Not how did he suppress it? Something stranger, something that, once you understand it, will change how you experience the very next annoying thing that happens to you today. Because here's the uncomfortable truth neuroscience keeps confirming. Anger isn't caused by what happens to you. That sounds wrong. It feels so obvious that someone else made you angry. Your coworker was rude. Your partner forgot. The driver cut you off. Surely that's the cause. But look closer. There's a gap. A tiny, almost invisible gap between the event and the reaction. The event hits the amygdala, the brain's ancient alarm system, in milliseconds. But whether that spark turns into a wildfire or just fizzles out depends on something else entirely. It depends on the story your mind tells about what just happened. Someone bumps into you on the street. Spark. If your brain story is that jerk did that on purpose, the fire spreads. If your brain story is they must be in a rush, the spark just dies. Same bump, two completely different fires. Epictetus built his whole philosophy around that gap. He never wrote a single word himself, too poor to own paper, so everything survives only because a student secretly took notes during his lectures. The core idea, roughly translated, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things, not the twisting of the leg, the judgment about the twisting of the leg. You'd expect a philosophy built by a crippled ex-slave to be about gritting your teeth through suffering. It isn't. It's almost the opposite. It's about noticing in that split-second gap that you have a choice most people don't know exists. Epictetus wasn't the only one running this experiment. Fast forward about 100 years, a far more powerful man is sitting in a leather tent along the frozen Danube frontier, surrounded by one of the ugliest wars Rome ever fought. He commands more power than almost anyone alive, and by candlelight alone, he's writing in a private notebook he never intended anyone else to read. His name is Marcus Aurelius. The notebook would later be called Meditations. What's remarkable isn't that an emperor had time to journal, it's what he's journaling about, not conquests, not politics, reminders to himself, almost desperate ones, about how not to hate the people around him. When you wake up, he tells himself, expect to meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, dishonest. He's not being cynical, he's preloading the disappointment so it can't ambush him later. He already understands what psychologists now call the expectation gap, the space between how we think people should behave and how they actually behave. That gap is where almost all human anger quietly lives. Anger, in most modern psychological models, isn't even a raw emotion. It's secondary. Underneath it, there's almost always something else. Fear, humiliation, a thwarted expectation. Anger is the loud reaction. Something quieter triggered it first. Marcus Aurelius, freezing, grieving several of his own children who'd already died in infancy, running an empire under attack on multiple fronts, figured out something that sounds too simple to matter. Most of what makes us furious isn't the event. It's the unmet expectation that the world or a person was supposed to behave differently. But here's where the story turns. This wasn't passive resignation. Both men were clear that some things deserve real action, correction, boundaries, seriousness. What they were doing was more surgical than that. They were separating what they could control from what they couldn't, and refusing to spend a single ounce of emotional energy on the second category. Epictetus put it almost mathematically. Some things are up to us, our judgments, our choices, our responses. Everything else, other people's opinions, the weather, an empire's fate, a driver cutting you off, simply isn't. Human misery, he argued, comes from confusing the two. Think about the last time you were genuinely furious. Chances are, underneath it, was a belief that something should have gone differently, about something you never actually had power over. This isn't just ancient poetry, it shows up in the clinic. In the 1950s, psychologist Albert Ellis, working in New York, developed rational emotive behavior therapy, a direct ancestor of modern cognitive behavioral therapy, still the most evidence-backed form of talk therapy in the world. Ellis said outright where the idea came from, Epictetus. Ellis built what he called the ABC model. A is the activating event, the bump on the street, the traffic. C is the consequence, the rage, the racing heart. And quietly doing all the actual work between them is B, the belief. Most people assume A causes C directly, but case after case revealed the same pattern Epictetus described 2,000 years earlier without any data at all. Change B and C changes with it, even when A stays exactly the same. That's why two people can face the identical insult and walk away in completely different emotional states. Same event, different beliefs running in the gap, different consequences. And this is really about the meeting you have tomorrow, the message sitting unanswered on your phone, the moment, probably within the next day, when someone does something that lands uninvited in that gap. Researchers studying emotional regulation today have confirmed the ancient insight with modern tools. The earlier you intervene in that gap, the easier the regulation. Trying to suppress anger after it's already a full physiological storm, heart pounding, jaw clenched, is exhausting and often fails. Catching it upstream at the level of interpretation before the story fully forms works far better. It's not about controlling your anger. It's about noticing the sentence your brain is about to write before it finishes writing it. Epictetus, teaching later in a modest school in Greece, used to tell his students a version of this exercise. When something happens, pause and say to yourself, this is simply an impression, not yet the thing it represents. The event is neutral, the bump is just a bump, the silence from a friend is just silence. Everything after that, the insult, the injustice, is a story your mind adds on top so fast it feels like fact. The crippled slave and the frozen emperor, separated by 100 years and every possible difference in status, arrived at almost identical conclusions because they were both staring at the same gap. Marcus Aurelius died still writing reminders to himself right up until close to the end, reminders that a man with total power over the known world still needed every single morning to tell himself not to let other people's smallness become his own. Epictetus died a free man, decades earlier, having taught some of the most powerful people in Rome, passing the ideas down like a quiet current running beneath the marble and politics of empire. Neither of them ever claimed the goal was to feel nothing. The goal was to see clearly, to notice the gap, to ask, in that half second before the fire catches, is this actually mine to control, or am I about to burn energy on something that was never in my hands? Somewhere right now, someone is about to say the wrong thing to you. Some small, forgettable moment is about to knock on the door of that gap. And for 1/2 of a second, the same half second a slave once had leg on a wooden block, and an emperor once had alone in a dying frontier tent, you get to decide what story you tell about it. That's the whole inheritance. Not calm as a mask, calm as a choice made new every single time, in a gap so small most people never even notice it's there.